Conditions may apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 57. A little birdie has some info on your case. It wasn't for another 2 days that they heard anything back from the detective. They had just apprehended a couple of guys trying to loot a convenience store. They caught them on their way out, and one of the guys took to wall climbing, and the other jumped up and started floating off. Eraser caught the guy floating off and was currently holding him like a balloon with his capture scarf, while Ivy knocked the guy climbing away off the wall. They were getting deja vu. This was just like Eraser and his leash toddler from a couple of months back, right down to the sticky, climby glove things. He was sending a message off to the detective with one hand, while Ivy tied the other guy up and took his gloves. They heard Eraser groan behind them as they finished their task, so they turned a questioning eyebrow toward him. Tsukauchi has an update, and he wants to meet us here, but he's currently on the other side of town, he explained. They mimicked his groan with perfect intonation. At least there's an update. Hopefully it's not as useless as the last one. What's his ETA? Half hour, he replied dryly. Ivy groaned even louder at that. Think the charge on those boots are going to hold out that long? Eraser asked casually as he looked up at the guy still trying to struggle free of his capture scarf about 30 feet in the air. I sure hope so. We could just tie him to the back of Suka's car like a parade float, they chirped. Eraser snorted out a laugh at that as he reluctantly started to pull the guy down. Both of the perps were awake, grounded, and bitching by the time Tsukauchi showed up, and they were more than happy to introduce them to the back of the cruiser and shut the door before Tsuka even got out. The detective raised a brow at them, but quickly lowered it once he got an earful. He got out of the car and shut the door pretty quickly after that. All right, I've got good news and bad news, and possibly even more bad news. The good news is we found out who the seller is, Seo Masayuki. And Ivy, your best guess of his quirk is actually what helped us find him. It is heat vision. Eraser gave them a congratulatory arm punch at that. It was a little too hard, and they definitely could have done without it, but so they shot him a look, while the detective continued. He's already part of an active investigation in Tokyo for support gear dealings, and your witness account finally gave the proof they needed to put a warrant out for his arrest and search his properties. However, the bad news is that by the time we put all the dots together, he'd already cleared out and left town. Ivy and Eraser looked at each other and let out a tired sigh. My thoughts exactly, the detective agreed. Do we have any leads on where he might have gone? Who's in charge of the case up there? Eraser asked. Yes, this brings me to my second point of potentially bad news. He started before he was cut off by a gust of wind and a red blur. All of a sudden, there was someone standing in front of them, bracing themselves with their hands on their knees and panting. Hey, he started out, but quickly realized he had not caught his breath enough to speak, so he just waved his hand and put up a finger in the universal "give me a sec" gesture. Eraser shot them a look before they turned to the detective, who had his face in his hand. Hawks, I presume, Tsukauchi greeted. The new arrival just nodded. All right, well, this is what I was trying to tell you anyway. The information you gave was enough for me to find the seller's identity, which linked me to another open investigation that Hawks here is manning over in Tokyo, he summarized. Eraser glanced uncomfortably between Hawks and Ivy for a second as the former finally caught his breath. Hey, I'm Hawks. Detective already said that. He paused to breathe again. I'm guessing you're Detective Tsukauchi, he asked. Tsukauchi nodded, and Hawks turned his attention to Eraser. And you're Eraserhead, right? Eraser eyed him critically before nodding. But you, I don't know. Who are you? He asked, shifting his focus to Ivy. Both Tsukauchi and Eraser slapped a hand over their mouth before they could respond. My masked speakers are on the side, you stupid dumb asses, they quipped, only slightly muffled but otherwise still entirely scrutable. Hawks looked between the three of them. His eyes had a fierce intelligence to them. It was off-putting, and they weren't sure that they could trust it. Before any of them could come up with a cover story, Hawks piped up, Okay, the less I know the better. What should I call you? Interesting. That was very interesting. Ivy. You can call me Ivy, they responded after studying him for a moment. Did you just fly here from Tokyo? Hawks let out a small, self-conscious laugh at that before replying, Yeah, I was listening to the police scanners and I heard a call about the case, so I got here as quick as I could. The three of them exchanged glances with each other again. Hawks, that's like 200 kilometers from here? Tsukauchi pointed out. Ha, no, it's only like 150 kilometers. That's why I was out of breath. Anyways, what's the deal? Give me the lowdown, he said, clapping and then rubbing his hands together with a smile, his chest still heaving. Perps are in the cruiser already. Tried to break into the store here. They had some anti-grav boots and climbing gloves. Haven't gotten the chance to question them yet, Tsukauchi replied after staring at him dumbly for a moment. All right, so what's the plan? I go with you to the station or bum around the streets with these guys? Hawks asked with a practiced, nonchalant grin. Ivy eyed him critically. He seemed to have worked out the situation between the three of them seconds after meeting them, and he was giving them an out. He seemed equal parts awkward and unsure, as he was confident in his skills and assessments, like he was trying to figure out where he stood in the power dynamic. Like he was well versed in this dance of acting flustered on purpose so that people would overlook him until he could find out what his standing was. Like he was afraid of something but trying his best to not let it show. Hawks was looking at them the same way they were looking at him, and it made them uncomfortable. They wanted him out of their streets. They shot a look at the detective in hopes that they would communicate their thoughts on the matter. Why don't you come with me? There's no guarantee you'll get any more info on this case out here anyway, the detective prompted after catching their glare. Good. The sound of the car door opening was deafening in the silence of the night, and they all shot their heads up to see one of the perps trying and failing to escape with his hands still behind his back. Before any of them could react, a small flash of red was pushing him back into the car and locking the door behind it before rolling down the driver's side window, flying back towards Hawks, and settling itself back into the plumage of his wings. Ivy's mind was reeling. They had so many questions. Could he control all of his feathers like that? How far can they go? How many can he keep track of at once? How durable were they? How much weight could they carry? What happens if they're lost or damaged? Could he Eraser cut off their line of thinking? Did you not lock the door? Eraser asked dryly. The detective blushed at that. Well, I thought I did, but obviously not. Both of them snorted at him. Listen, we were right here. It's not like they could have gotten far anyway, he defended. Hawks was studying the three of them again and steadfastly keeping his mouth shut. When he caught Ivy's gaze, he let out a huff of air through his nose and smirked. It was performative. He only did it when he realized they were looking. What was he playing at? Ivy continued glaring at him as they bid their goodbyes, shuffled into the car, and drove away. Something about him didn't sit well with them, and they didn't have enough information to say what yet. They'd need to look into this guy. They didn't like having unknown variables in their streets. Well, that was interesting, Eraser remarked after they drove away. That's certainly one way of putting it, they shot back. You don't trust him. He stated plainly. No, no, I don't. Everything about him is fake. All of it is an act, but I don't know how or what to what end. You seem sure of that. Who does he work for? He's a hero, obviously, but I've never heard of him. Have you? What agency is he with? They asked, ignoring his comment entirely. No, I've not heard of him either. I have no idea, but he seems fine with you being here. What's got you so against him? You can't tell me you trust him. That was weird. I know you noticed it too, they accused. I'm not saying I didn't. There was definitely something off with him. But I don't think you're going to figure it out if you keep being so hostile. Hostile? I wasn't being hostile, they argued. Ivy, you glared daggers into his skull until the car was fully out of sight, he countered. Okay, that was fair. They did do that. Well, I don't want him in my streets. I don't trust him. Sometimes you gotta work with people you don't want to, kid. I'm not gonna let him take you in, but I don't think he's even gonna try. I know his type. He's a young hero shooting for the limelight. All he cares about is establishing a name for himself. Bringing in a vigilante no one outside of Uptown has heard of isn't going to get him there. But bringing down a support gear syndicate spanning over 2 prefectures will. He could be helpful. I wouldn't write him off so soon, Eraser explained. Quit playing the devil's advocate. That guy was off. Ivy shot back. Yeah, he was a bit weird, but maybe he's just awkward. He's young. Give him a break. Neither of us are very approachable, and your glaring certainly didn't help the situation, he said before walking off and effectively ending the argument. Since when are you self-aware enough to realize how unapproachable you are? Ivy sneered under their breath as they followed. Eraser shot him a look that said he definitely heard that and was not amused, before ascending the nearest building to get back up to the rooftops. End of chapter.